Hola amigos, and welcome back to my channel. I'm going to talk to you today about how you go about landing a traditional publishing deal after you have been self-published. Now, obviously there are pros and cons to both traditional and self-publishing, and I am by no means saying that you should want to move to being traditionally published if you are very happy being self-published. A career in self-publishing can be an excellent choice for a lot of writers, and moving over to traditional publishing is definitely not for everyone. There are many things that I love about self-publishing, chief of these being the freedom that it allows me. This was particularly helpful when I was publishing my first contemporary romance, The Green Hills of Home, 11 years ago when I had 4 children under 8 years old, and it would have just been really hard for me to be able to stick to any publishing deadlines. One of the great things about self-publishing is that it's a really great way to start out with a lot less pressure than traditional publishing. You can do things at your own pace and not have to worry about sticking to deadlines set by your publisher. Then, if like me, you find you continue with your writing, have more time to write consistently and to stick to deadlines, and don't like or aren't very good at the marketing side of publishing, it might be time to consider approaching a traditional publisher. While moving from self-publishing to traditional publishing isn't something the vast majority of authors do, there are some very famous writers who have taken this route. Andy Weir is a fantastic example. He wrote The Martian, which went on to become a massive bestseller and became a movie starring Matt Damon, which never fails to make me cry at one particular point. Let me know in the chat if you can guess what that bit of the movie is. Anyway, Mr. Weir didn't think that any traditional publishers would be interested in his work. So he went and he launched small little bits of it on a blog, and very quickly grew a big following. Realizing that people did actually like what he wrote, he self-published The Martian, and it became a #1 Amazon bestseller. Soon after, he signed a lucrative publishing and film rights deal. To date, his book has sold about 3 million copies, and the film grossed $630 million worldwide. E.L. James is another great example. She wrote her romantic erotica series 50 Shades of Grey as a fan fiction piece based on the YA series Twilight. After changing characters, taking out the vampires and the werewolves and tweaking the story quite a bit, James self-published the first part of the trilogy and saw masses of success in her first year. In fact, within that first year, she received a traditional publishing deal, and the rest, as they say, is history. 50 Shades of Grey would go on to sell over 100 million copies and become one of the fastest selling paperbacks in history, as well as becoming a series of films which apparently some people managed to sit through. Then we have American businessman and author Robert Kiyosaki. So he had a pretty rough start. He was told by many publishers and agents that nobody would be interested in his manuscript, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He decided to self-publish, and the book was then taken on by a publisher. To date, Rich Dad, Poor Dad has sold over 40 million copies in over 50 languages in 109 countries, and it was on the New York Times bestseller list for over 6 years. Another example is Lisa Genova. Before the Oscar-winning film adaptation of her book Still Alice, which is the story of a university professor who develops early onset Alzheimer's disease, she wrote and self-published the novel in 2007. She was rejected many times by commercial publishers, which is why she decided to go it alone. But after gaining popularity, the book was signed by Simon & Schuster and was republished in 2009. These, of course, are examples of huge success, but landing a traditional publishing deal after self-publishing is also possible for regular humans. I know this because I managed it. Make sure you've got a cuppa handy because this story takes a while. Way back in the annals of history, in 2013, I wrote my first romance book, The Green Hills of Home, basically on a whim. I decided to self-publish it because I wanted to get the book out there and read, and I didn't feel I had the time or the energy to query it potentially for years without having a publisher interested. As I mentioned earlier, I had 4 children under 8 years old at the time, which kind of, kept me quite busy. I also imagined that a publisher would want me to stick to strict deadlines, which I just wasn't sure I would be able to do. And I didn't even know if I would go on to write anything else. To be honest, previous to that, I'd focused on writing children's picture books. I think that I'm right in that the only thing that I actually paid for when self-publishing that book was an ISBN, which you need to pay for in the UK, although not in some other countries. I'm definitely not saying that this is the best way to do things, it just happens to be what I did. My husband helped me to edit and proofread the book, and he designed the cover and formatted the book for me. The Green Hills of Home got some lovely reviews, and I absolutely worked my bottom off doing guest posts on blogs, posting on social media, and I even did an author talk in a library, which I found absolutely terrifying, and I'm not sure that I would ever be brave enough to do again now. I did already have a little bit of a following before releasing this book because I ran a book review website for several years before self-publishing. And so I wasn't completely unknown in the writing community, I guess. And this definitely gave me an in when it came to my Facebook posts being shared by other authors, for example. Anyway, being a sucker for punishment, I decided to write my second book, which went considerably faster because I did a little bit of planning with this one and I didn't hop around writing whatever scene I fancied nearly as much. As I was finishing it, I happened to interview an author for my book review website, and she mentioned that she just signed with a new publisher and they sounded really interesting. She was really pleased with what they'd been doing for her. And so I looked them up and decided to submit to them. And not only did they accept my second book, then called His Secret Daughter, but they also wanted the rights to The Green Hills of Home. And so that was the first time that I had one of my previously self-published books taken on by a traditional publisher. I went on to publish 2 novellas and another full-length romance with this publisher before I left them because I had a problem with my left ear, which caused such bad vertigo that I wasn't able to use a computer, and so I was just unable to write another book for them. Fast forward a couple of years and I was feeling so much better that I wrote my rock star romance, Starstruck, which I decided to self-publish. This was mainly because I was really worried that my vertigo would come back. And so I very much wanted things to be on my own terms and to be able to control everything in case I wasn't able to do some of the things that I wanted to. I didn't want to be beholden, if you like, to a publisher and to have those deadlines, which I would then have the stress of not being able to meet if my vertigo did come back again. So not only did I self-publish that book, but I decided to self-publish all of my previously published works as well, which was a really big undertaking. This time I actually paid for some stock photos to use when designing the covers as well as ISBNs, so I was really splashing out. This was the big leagues. I was able to transfer over Amazon reviews to the new editions, which definitely gave them a boost, but I still wasn't reaching a wide enough audience to have really decent sales. And I imagine a lot of that was just down to my poor marketing at the time, to be honest. And so a year later, I gave a publisher another try. I had a new book that I'd written, Her Sister's Baby, and it was published by a small indie publisher. They ended up doing an absolutely terrible job, I'm afraid, and I demanded my rights back within the year. It actually took me another year and a half, I think, to get those rights back, but it can be done. So fast forward another year and I'd written my romance Falling in Love at Nightingale Farm. I sent this off to 2 publishers, still thinking that it would be a good idea to get at least some of my books traditionally published so that the pressure of marketing them was off me and I was feeling more confident that my vertigo wouldn't come back at this point. So the first of these publishers made me an offer, but I didn't think that they'd actually be the best fit in the end. The second publisher also made me an offer, but bizarrely, they weren't happy for me to have any other books published at all. So I would have had to unpublish all of my self-published books and not offer them to any other publisher or self-publish them again, which seemed more than a little unreasonable. I then decided to try one last publisher and sent them Nightingale Farm. They made me an offer for it and wanted to take on my other full-length self-published books as well, which I hadn't even been offering at the time. After a lot of umming and ahhing, because I really do like the control you have when self-publishing, as well as the higher royalties, and I spent a lot of time getting those books ready to be self-published. I really liked the covers. I was very attached to them. But I did actually sign a 5-book contract with Joffrey Books in 2022 and another 4-book contract in 2023, and they remain my current publishers. And so you can see my publishing journey has definitely had twists and turns, and I'm pretty sure that it will continue to do so. But what we're focusing on here is the fact that I am now traditionally published after self-publishing, and that my self-published books were actually included in publishing deals. So let's move on to how you can set yourself up to achieve the same thing. I want to concentrate today on my bigger publishing deal, the one that I signed in 2022, when discussing what I believe I did, which secured me my publisher. This was a 5-book deal consisting of 4 previously self-published books, which was still self-published when the publisher offered for them. And in fact, my contract stipulated a date I needed to take each of them down from Amazon on. And then also there was a previously unpublished brand new book, which they were signing for. I should say that one of the books included in this contract in particular had a lot of Amazon reviews. It had ended up being a pretty big bestseller years before. And so this was a big draw to my publisher, I believe, as these were carried over to the new editions they put out. So the first thing that is absolutely essential that I believe that you do when querying a traditional publisher after self-publishing is to choose the right publisher. Different publishers publish different genres and will be looking for certain books at any given time. So even if they are a publisher which specializes in fantasy books, for example, they might in particular be looking for fantasy books starring elves, for example, for the next few months. And they might not be looking for anything with wizards, even though previously they have wanted just wizards. Make sure you are approaching the right publisher in that, first of all, that they're accepting submissions and that they are accepting unsolicited manuscripts as well, if you don't want to go down the agent route, which I didn't. And that they're publishing your genre and are looking to publish more of it. So I knew the publisher that I was approaching quite well. I knew that they were very well respected. They'd grown hugely in, I think it was about 10 years previously that they started up. And I knew that they were looking to expand into romance after focusing on thrillers previously. So it really was perfect timing for me. A lot of that was chance, it has to be said, but there was also quite a bit of research that went into it. So the next point that I'd like to make is that it is really important that you follow their submission guidelines. All publishers have guidelines as to how they accept submissions. You need to make sure that you read them through really thoroughly and follow them to the letter. Some ask for double spacing, for example. Some want a 1-page synopsis, while others want 2. There's all kinds of different things. I know that it can sound like being fussy, but publishers get sent an awful lot of manuscripts and you want to give yours the best chance. There are definitely publishers out there who simply won't look at your submission if you haven't followed their guidelines. I do have to say though that I broke this rule a little bit when I was getting in touch with my publishers, because I actually sent an email to gauge interest in my submission without formally submitting it, because I wanted to make absolutely sure that it would be something they'd consider. I was then asked to send my completed manuscript. That was of the one that had never been published before and never needed to bother with a synopsis in that case. And they didn't even read the other books, the ones which were self-published, before they offered me a contract. I'm guessing that they just figured that they would, they had good reviews and that they were in a similar style to the unpublished book which they had read, and so they were happy with that. So another point that I'd like to make, and this is something that I have seen self-published writers doing before, is that even though you may have completely beautiful editions of your self-published book, maybe you've even got special edition hardbacks or something like that, please do not consider sending these to a publisher as your submission. They want you to follow the guidelines. They want you to send them electronically whatever files that they have asked for. Something that I would really recommend when submitting to a traditional publisher, although this one definitely takes some time and commitment, is to have multiple books written. Self-publishing at least one book should put you in a better position when it comes to approaching publishers. You'll have a proven track record of sorts. Most publishers are looking to invest in an author long term. It costs a lot for them to put out a book. They're not just going to want to go to all that effort to get their author on the website to promote that author just for one book. They want you to have several books out with them. They don't want to take a chance on someone who's written one book, or maybe even just a synopsis and a few chapters of a book. If you have at least one book behind you and another you're offering, it shows you're serious and not just a one-hit wonder. So I guess this was the first thing that I did right. I had a new book I was offering and 4 full-length romances and 2 novellas already under my belt. Even with my first publishing contract, I had a complete manuscript as well as 1 self-published book. Now, in general, publishers will want first publishing rights, so it is more likely that you would be offered a publishing deal for a new work rather than one that has been published before. You might also decide that you don't want to give up the rights to your self-published books and that you're not offering these. I wasn't planning to offer my self-published books, if you recall. What I found with my 2 novellas, which remain self-published, is that they sell now without me having to market them. And this is presumably because of people buying my traditionally published books and then stumbling upon the novellas when they're looking for more of my titles. So this is a definite bonus and is something to bear in mind when you are deciding whether you want to offer your self-published books included in publication. My next suggestion when querying is to be positive about self-publishing and your self-publishing experience. Like I say, I didn't actually offer my self-published books in my querying letter, but I did of course talk about them, pointing out that, some of them had been bestsellers, the number of reviews that they had and things like that. And I think it's really important to remain positive about your experience with self-publishing. Present the choice that you made to self-publish as one that was deliberate and that was very carefully thought out. Never hide the fact that your book began life as a self-published project. Self-publishing is absolutely nothing to be ashamed of, and publishers know that authors can learn a lot from the experience and bring valuable insights into their target audience. Next, I would like to encourage you to showcase your brand. You should do all that you can to build up your author brand before submitting to a publisher. Work out which social media platforms you want to present on and do them well. An active social media following from a strong author platform with a loyal fan base is something that is really going to appeal to a traditional publisher. You will have a ready built market, and that's exactly what a publisher is after. They don't want just another manuscript, they get sent a lot of manuscripts. What's going to make an author stand out is already having a following. This is honestly even more attractive to a publisher than if your book that you've self-published has sold a lot of copies. Remember, the bigger your following, the lower the potential marketing costs the publisher needs to factor in for your book are. When I submitted to my publisher, I had an author website, Instagram account, Twitter as it was known then, and I had a Facebook page as well. I'd also recently started my YouTube channel, so I had people who'd read my stuff and who wanted a new book from me. My next tip is to compare your books to others. Let the publisher you are submitting to know what to expect from your work by comparing it to other authors in your submission letter. Just a simple line in your query like, "My books are perfect for fans of blah blah blah," listing some authors with similar styles in your genre. This tells the publisher a lot, and it's a quick way for them to be able to tell if your book will be a right fit for them at the moment. My final suggestion is to share data. Anyone who self-published a book is aware that it is an awful lot of hard work if you want to do it well and hopefully sell copies. But actually self-publishing a book, as in sticking something on Amazon and hoping for the best, is incredibly easy. And publishers know this. They are not going to be impressed simply by the fact that you've self-published even multiple books. They're going to want to see reviews and social media stats, as well as any evidence that you have of good sales if you manage to achieve that, which is something I honestly never managed when self-publishing. Make sure that you put any information like this in your query letter. Don't leave it to them to try to search it out, especially because there might be things that they miss. For example, if your book was a bestseller when you released it a year ago, that's not going to show up on Amazon easily for them. So just make sure that you put that into your letter. As I said at the beginning of my talk, making the move from self to traditional publishing is definitely not for everyone. There are plenty of writers who are very happy self-publishing either because they just enjoy it, or for the higher royalties, or because of the control they have over their work. One of the hardest things about being traditionally published after self-publishing is losing your autonomy over your work. You'll be giving up the rights to your book baby, and you will likely lose control over artwork and other design elements. This can be hard if you're used to being able to have everything exactly as you like it. I'm very thankful that my publisher does an amazing job. I have wonderful editors and I'm thrilled with the cover designs for my books. I've been able to say if there's something I'm unhappy with, and my suggestions have been implemented. But this is definitely not the case with all publishers, and it is important to be aware of that and not just fall into the trap of thinking that being traditionally published is definitely the right choice for every writer. You've absolutely got to do what is right for you. And bear in mind that if you do get a traditional contract and it doesn't work out for you, you can get your rights back and return to self-publishing if you wish. I'm really happy at the moment being a hybrid author. A lot of my marketing and fiddly bits of publishing, which I struggle with, are dealt with for me, but I still get to have total autonomy over my non-fiction titles, which I self-publish. It's a nice mix, for now at least.